Friends, let us continue our discussion on gas liquid reactions, and in this session we will wrap up that discussion and start looking at reactor design. Now, last time we saw few cases depending on whether the reaction is slow or fast or moderately fast, how reaction is likely to proceed. That is, if the reaction is extremely slow, and if we are looking at gas liquid reactions in the framework of two film theory, then there is hardly any reaction in the hydrodynamic or mass transfer boundary layer, and the entire reaction is restricted to the bulk. Making reaction little faster gives you a picture which looks something like this, that you have a hydrodynamic boundary layer in which there is a diffusion and reaction which is simultaneously taking place, apart from the fact that there will be a reaction in the bulk liquid. And when we deal with this kind of reactions, there are two ways of looking at these reactions, namely rating by looking at what is the observed rate and what would have been the rate if mass transfer limitations were not there. That is a traditional way which we saw even for gas solid catalytic reaction. But another way of looking at the same process is what is the observed rate and what would have been the rate if reaction was not there. That means, we are looking at absorption of gas A from the gaseous phase into the liquid. So, what would have been that rate if only mass transfer was there, that is there was no chemical reaction. And we saw that because of chemical reaction, there is actually enhancement of the observed rate. That is, the mass transfer with chemical reaction results into rate of higher rate of absorption of gas into the liquid. If that is the case, then in designing any gas purification streams, one would like to have as high reaction rate as possible, because that would enhance the absorption of gas to the maximum extent possible. And therefore, we have reactive species in the liquid when we try to absorb any gas, even though gas may have some partial solubility in just water, but that would be simply case of mass transfer. And when you add a reactive species like potassium hydroxide or sodium hydroxide or ethanol amines, then you are actually making the aqueous solution reactive, so that there is mass transfer with chemical reaction. And since we are also looking at increasing the rates of reaction, then we are also looking at increasing the temperatures, for example, hot solutions, so that reaction rates are higher. Now, we need to now start worrying about what will happen if the reaction rate is even faster. So, we have a fast reaction, which case, as you can see from here, our concentrations of these two species in the bulk will start going down. That is, if the reaction in this hydrodynamic boundary layer is faster and faster, then the concentrations of A and will go on depleting faster and faster. And we may come across a situation for moderately fast to fast reaction, where by the time A reaches the boundary layer thickness delta L, entire A is consumed. If that is the case, then there can't be any reaction in the bulk, but the reaction would be limited only to the hydrodynamic boundary layer. That is what will happen if the reaction is fast. Let us make reaction even faster, because we saw that there is order of magnitude difference in kinetic rate constants of different reactions, gas liquid reactions. So, what will happen if we make it even more faster? So, if we make this reaction even more fast, that is very fast, let us say, then there will be a point, for example, if we look at this particular case, if the reaction is slightly faster, then what will happen is that A will get depleted even earlier and earlier, and there will be actually two fronts, two fronts where on one side A is getting depleted, on other side B is getting depleted, and reaction is so fast that as soon as A and B come into contact with each other, this species will react and leading to concentrations of A and B close to 0 at some location delta R. Or in other words, the reaction now will not be occurring in this entire boundary layer, but almost along this reaction front or along the plane, that is not in the volume of this boundary, but along the plane which defines this boundary. Now, initially this front will be located at y equal to delta L, and as reactions go on becoming faster and faster, this front will move towards the gas liquid interface, and the reaction will stop when the concentrations go to 0 at this particular interface itself. So, let us just quickly look at how do we analyze this situation and write down the relevant mass balances to see how we define this system. So, let us say that we have our hydrodynamic we have our interface hydrodynamic boundary layer delta L, and what is happening to the gas is that the gaseous component is getting dissolved, and at this location both A and B goes to 0, that is, this is the front at which the reaction is occurring. So, reaction front. So, this is my A, this is my B, this is some bulk concentration of B, and this is some partial pressure at the interface. So, what we have now here is between 0 to delta R only diffusion of A, because there can't be any reaction, because at this point there is no B left. So, there is only diffusion of A, whereas between delta R and delta L there is only diffusion of B, and at delta R there is a instantaneous reaction. So, diffusion on these two between 0 to delta R and delta R to L, and reaction at delta R. So, in this particular case we can set up the mass balances just as we did earlier, that is namely for A, for example, if you look, this is the diffusion and there is no reaction between 0 to delta R, and the limits are at y equal to 0, Ca is equal to Cai, which is in equilibrium with the gas, and at y equal to delta R, Ca is equal to 0. A similar mass balance can be written for B, and if we do all this, if we do all these things, then we can then find out our flux, which was minus dA dCA dy at y equal to 0, and this comes out to be that is, if we solve mass balances for A and B and use the appropriate boundary conditions, we will end up with the flux, that is, as we are standing in the gas phase, what is the rate of absorption of observed rate of absorption of A in the liquid. So, this is given by this particular expression, and we can then immediately see, we can go on then to define, for example, effectiveness factor, that is effectiveness factor, which is what is my flux, actual observed flux, to what would have been the flux if there was no mass transfer limitation. Same thing as before, as well as we can define our enhancement factor F A or E as what is my observed flux, to what would have been the flux if there was only mass transfer. So, we can put area in both cases, but those will get cancelled out. So, what would have been the flux, and from this flux equation, that is nothing but that would have been my effectiveness or enhancement factor. So, depending upon the values of the bulk concentrations and the diffusivities, I will have different values of effectiveness factor. So, essentially the idea is that if you have a very fast reaction, the reaction is restricted only to the plane, and then we can get various enhancement factors, and this is what is actually shown in this particular figure. The top figure was for moderate reaction, and these are the different values that you will get depending on the value of this dB by dA and so on. So, this is how enhancement factor diagrams will look like for a fast reaction. With this, we now come to the conclusion of our discussion on gas liquid reaction, and in general on discussion on heterogeneous reactions. To recap what we started out with, after we had a brief review of undergraduate chemical reaction engineering, we looked at different complex kinetics. So, our first module, if you like to call it, was focused on looking at the complex kinetics and what are the different scenarios where one gets this complex kinetics. So, we had catalysis, we had chain reactions and different types, but more than that we focused on how do we analyze complex reactions, how do we get the kinetics when the reactions number is large or species are unknown and so on. So, that was mainly our module 1. In the second module, we looked at the heterogeneous reactions, that is reactions when there are more than one phase present, and as a result of phases there are boundaries, and because there are boundaries there is a mass transfer or energy transfer limitations, and we saw how these influence the kinetics of the process. That is what essentially the transport phenomena, what role does it play in determining the kinetics. Now, all that we now need to know to complete our discussion on chemical reaction engineering is to now actually put this two together, that is the kinetics and heterogeneous reactions, into our reactor and look at how reactor behavior is influenced by either the kinetics or by the transport phenomena or by the characteristic of the reactor itself. We had briefly talked about design equations for reactors, but those were mainly for ideal reactor, plug flow reactor or continuously stirred tank or continuously stirred reactor where there is very good mixing or anything in between. What at that point of time we did not pay much attention to, for example, heat effects of a chemical reaction. So, we never, for example, discussed about non-isothermal reactor. So, those are some of the things that we will now discuss in our third module, which will be the concluding module for this particular course. It will run, I think, for another 10 to 15 lectures, where we will do mix of things. I will start out by formulating general mass and energy balances for the reactor, and then look at the behavior of non-isothermal reactions, because they lead to quite interesting set of behavior, and look at design of few reactors were taken from industrial practice. So, let us begin our discussion on looking at the reactor design. So, what are the basic ideas in reactor design? Just general background before we go into the detailed discussion on reactor design. Now, when we say we want to design a reactor, we must be absolutely clear as to why are we designing this reactor, what are our objectives. So, any reactor design, or for that matter any design activity, always has to start with well defined objectives. So, what are the possible objectives in a chemical reactor design? It turns out that there are several types of objectives that may come into picture. For example, our objectives may be technological in nature, that is purely technology, kinetics and so on. So, it says that maximum possible product in minimum time, that is one kind of a technological objective. It may not be always maximum possible, but you have certain desired quantity in mind. So, achieve that in minimum time. So, you may be able to make more than that, but maybe the time required is more. So, you be happy with the desired quantity in absolutely minimum time. Maximum possible product in desired time is other way of looking at the same problem. So, these are all technological in nature, these objectives, but the real objective in any commercial operation are the economic objectives, that is maximize profit, as simple as that. Now, that may take the form of maximizing either productivity or maximizing yield, that is technological aspect, but bottom line, anybody who wants to design and run and make some commercial venture out of a chemical reaction, the objective is maximize profit. While we talk about these objectives, I want to also emphasize that it is not that the design is always done with a single objective in mind, because even if you want to maximize profit, you also now are required to minimize losses. That is, there should not be any effluents coming out of your plant, dumping anything in the aqueous environment or in the air and so on. So, your objective actually could be maximize profit while minimizing the environmental impact. So, it is a multi-objective problem. So, more often than not, one comes across situations where there are two objectives that one wants to meet, and it's many times it is not possible that both these objectives will be met simultaneously. So, there has to be a trade off, and therefore, we have various multi-optimization or multi-objective optimization strategies designed to look at these kind of problems. Defining objective is only the starting point. The second point that, or second aspect that we have to focus on, how do I achieve these objectives? That means, what are the things that I decide so that I can achieve these objectives, or in other words, what are my decision variables. Before we go to decision variable, I want to go back to my objectives, and these objectives would not be difficult to achieve if there were no constraints on our system. So, what are those constraints? So, while defining the reactor design objective, we must be aware of what are the constraints under which we are working. So, there are various different types of constraints, and I will start with market forces first. Raw material availability. For example, if you want to design something starting with natural gas, your likely preference would be the source of natural gas wherever it is available, because you do not want to transport gas over long distance, although that is being done, but your preference still would be that you either have it on the coastal region or wherever there is a ready available source, and that is applicable to all other industries also. That is, availability, quality, quantity and so on is a constraint. So, within that you have to work. Then the demand for product. You may have a wonderful product, but if there is no demand, there is no design. Then there are more important societal or legislative constraints. Safety, for example, is the prime constraint that has to be satisfied. You cannot compromise on that, otherwise you will pretty soon go out of business. Pollution control. So, zero discharge policies as implemented by several societies. So, that is your constraint. So, you may have a wonderful product, you may be able to get wonderful yields from it, but while doing so, if you are generating undesirable waste, that process is not going to take you anywhere. So, while designing itself or developing the process itself, one must be aware of what is the constraint under which I am working. Am I allowed to discharge this much material in the aqueous stream, or what are the costs involved if I have to treat this material. So, all that has to now come into your design criteria. And lastly, but not the least important, that is actually what will give you the product desired product, are the technological constraints. We studied about thermodynamics, stoichiometry, kinetics in the first module of this session. But another way of looking at these thermodynamic considerations is look at them as constraints. See, I may desire that I want 90% conversion of my reactant, but thermodynamic dictates that the equilibrium conversion is only 60%. So, how do I go from 60% to 90%? First of all, left to itself, you cannot do anything about it. So, thermodynamics has become your constraint. Is there any way of overcoming this constraint? Yes, you may have a separation scheme where you continuously keep removing product, so that your thermodynamics is now equilibrium is shifted towards making of more product. So, but whatever is the solution, there is a constraint. Stoichiometry is another constraint. I may want 1000 kg of certain product, but then stoichiometry dictates that unless I spend some 2000 kg of something else, I may not be able to generate the 1000 kg of desired material, or all those stoichiometric coefficients, 1 mole of this combines with 2 moles of that to give you 1 mole of this, that kind of reactions that we saw. So, to make 1 mole of product, you may have to require 2 moles of reactants, or 1 mole of certain reactant, 2 moles of certain other reactant and so on. And lastly, the kinetics. Now, in deriving any maximum profit out of your process or increasing the productivity, you would be rather impatient, isn't it? You would like that reaction to be as fast as possible, instantaneous if it is left to you. So, moment you have two reactants coming in contact, they react, give you wonderful product. Unfortunately, kinetics of the process has its own limitations. Even without any mass transfer or heat transfer limitations, the reactions have some finite rate, as we saw, which depends on temperature, concentration and so on. So, that is what is the constraint on your process now. Then you have mass transfer putting additional constraint. For example, if it is a heterogeneous reaction, your mass transfer itself may become limiting or putting limitation on how fast you can drive the reaction and so on. So, all these factors now became constraints for us. Alright. So, we have objectives, we have these constraints under which we are working. So, how do we meet our desired objective while restricting ourselves within this constraint domain? How do we do that? So, what are the decisions that we take? There are certain types of decisions that we often make, and one of the foremost, for example, is what kind of reactor do we choose? Do we choose a tubular reactor or a fixed bed reactor, stirred tank reactor, fluidized bed reactor for a given process? Now, that will depend on what kind of process is it. For example, tubular, or I mean if it is a gas solid process, fixed bed reactors or fluidized bed reactors are likely candidates. Now, whether we go for tubular or stirred tank or fixed or fluidized, they are equivalent counterparts for gas solid reactions, will be determined by what is the kinetics of the process. If you recall, in our initial discussion, we saw that often for first order reaction, for example, tubular reactor will give you higher conversion. But we also saw a case where if it is not the conversion, but the selectivity is what is of importance, then stirred tank reactor may give you better selectivity than plug flow. So, all these decisions will have to be made. Second set of decisions that we have to make is how do we operate this reactor? What is the mode of operation? Do we operate it as mass flow, that is in terms of batch, continuous or semi batch process, or in terms of energy flow, that is isothermal, adiabatic, co-current or counter current, or what kind of operation do we do? And of course, of late there is another kind of decision that has become equally important: process intensification. How do I get most out of my existing? So, can I combine more than one process, that is reaction and separation into a single step, or any other means of process intensification? So, now let us given this background, let us start discussing about the reactor design, and we will start this by considering simple mass balances and energy balances for stirred tank reactors, tubular reactors and so on. So, we will just take a brief overview of these design equations and then move on to the actual examples of few reactor behavior. So, before we get into the material itself, just a word about different terminology that we will be using. For example, Fj as gram mole of J per second, that is molar flow rate. I am just repeating some of these things we had seen earlier, but for sake of clarity let us just repeat this once again. Okay. So, Fj is the molar flow rate, Cj is the concentration, gram mole of J per meter cube, let us say, the units, whether they are in decimeter cube or meter cube or centimeter cube, is left to you, but essentially this is what we will do. Nj, number of moles, so just gram mole. So, molar flow rate, concentration and molar flow rate, concentration, moles, and one more volumetric flow rate. So, F prime as meter cube per second, let us say. So, it is not very difficult to see that Cj into F prime is Fj. I mean that's how we define. Few more set of notations. U, the velocity, meter per second, let us say. Okay. A, meter square cross sectional area. Then we will use flux, which is gram mole per meter square second. Okay. Rj, rate of reaction, so gram mole per meter cube per second. Then rho j, the density, gram of J per meter cube, let us say. Rho f, the density of the entire reacting mixture, rho j is the density of the jth species. So, this we can define as gram per meter cube, and then molecular weight mj and so on. What we are interested in looking at, set of reactions in species Aj. So, J goes from 1 to n, and there are such independent reactions I equal to 1 to up to r. So, this is what we are going to look at, and to begin with we will start with homogeneous reaction in a tubular reactor. So, essentially, although we will not repeat this exercise again and again, the idea is you have a tubular reactor, you look at the cross sectional delta z. So, let us say this is its entry point, this is the exit point, and you are looking at cross section delta z. Then we write a simple mass balance, accumulation equal to whatever is coming in minus going out plus generation. So, we can then use all the appropriate terminologies to represent accumulation, and I am going to write this only once, so that we do the similar exercise for everything else. So, if Cj is the concentrations, the mass balance is in terms of mass. So, moles, not in terms of concentrations. So, whatever was present at time t plus delta t minus whatever was present at time t is the mass which is accumulated, and since I am doing it in terms of mass, it has to be multiplied by the volume, which is A delta z, will be whatever is coming in. So, let us write down this in terms of flux of J at z minus going out flux of J at z plus delta z, and this flux. So, to get moles multiply by area and flux as time. So, this happening in small time interval delta t is what represents my in and out term, and the rate of reaction R j for the species J. R j is not rate of any one particular reaction, but R j is the rate of change or generation of jth species. If you recall, that was nu I j R I, this is my R j, that is R I is the rate of ith reaction, stoichiometric coefficient for jth species is nu I j. So, summed over all such reactions for jth species gives me R j, but this is per unit volume and per unit time. So, A delta Z delta T. So, this is my simple mass balance, which we now divide by delta Z delta T, take a limit as delta Z goes to 0, delta T goes to 0, we will end up with this kind of mass balances. And here we are going to look at only final set of equations, so that discussion proceeds at a reasonable rate. Detailed derivations you can find in any standard textbook. So, for example, the first set of equation that we get is our mass balance equation from the same balance that we wrote, dou T of Cj, and partial equation because both time and spatial axial coordinate is considered or spatial coordinate is considered. So, both equation in time and space domain. So, we have partial differential equation, unsteady state balance into flux of J equal to R j. And what is this flux of J? There are two forces that are responsible for flux. One, the convective flux, which is U into Cj, plus diffusive flux, which is J of J. So, this flux in my mass balance can be represented in this particular manner. So, now if I do the summation, that is multiply this equation by mj and summed it over all species, you get this kind of equation, which you can see summation mj Cj. Mj is the molecular weight, Cj is the moles of species J. So, this is nothing but density of my fluid rho f, this is nothing but U rho f, and summation mj Rj. See, when you have a stoichiometric reaction, let us say A1 going to A2, then rate of reaction for R1, A1 is let us say R1, for A2 is R2. If you multiply M1 by R1 plus M2 by R2, this must add up to 0. Why? Because this is what is the mass of A1 that is disappearing, this is what is the mass of A2 that is appearing in this particular reaction. So, the net sum of these two must be 0, because you are not going to generate mass out of nowhere. The reason why A2 is getting formed is because A1 is getting consumed. So, we have loss of A1, which results into generation of A2. So, not in terms of moles, but in terms of mass. So, that is why we multiply by molecular weight, their addition must be 0, and this is applicable even more general. You have any n number of species which are getting generated at a rate R1, then summation over all those species must be equal to 0. So, if that is the case, we end up with this equation, and this equation is nothing but the continuity equation even for a non-reacting species. So, even for reacting species, the continuity equation remains the same, that you must have seen in your transport course when you deal with such course. Now, let's try to look at energy balance, and energy balance is slightly more involved, but I think there is a analogy that one can always draw. Let me see if I have indicated it here. Okay. If you recall our mass balance which we saw just few minutes back, corresponding energy balance for the reactor would be can be written, and this is actually equation taken from Van Ness and Smith for internal energy balance. Is the same thing, accumulation of energy, the flux and the rate of addition or removal of heat Q. Now, it turns out that we actually do not see any reaction term over there, and for which you have to actually write internal energy U as enthalpy C T H minus P, that is C T U is C T H minus P, and if you go on simplifying or expanding these terms, we actually get this kind of equation. That is, all we are doing is expanding these terms, and finally we are left with the following equation: summation H j into delta C j delta T plus 1 over this particular term. This actually, if you notice, is nothing but our reaction term. So, if you take this particular term, this simplifies to this summation delta H I R I. Then the first term simplifies to this. So, we have this plus delta H I R I, and if you say that suppose we have our tubular reactor and it is a shell and tube kind of arrangement. The diameter is, let us say, dt, the heat transfer coefficient, let us say, is U, and there is a fluid at a temperature Tr flowing through this shell side, reaction is occurring in the tube side, then the heat added to the system is one can show is 4 by dt U into Tr minus T. So, if Tr, that is the temperature outside, is greater than the temperature in the reactor, the heat will be added, and if it is other way around, there will be cooling. So, what do we have here? We have the energy accumulation term, the convective transport term, the reaction term, what is the rate of generation of energy, and energy addition term. So, this is the comprehensive form of energy balance equation for a tubular reactor. So, when we deal with mass and energy balance, we have to consider this energy balance along with our mass balance equation. Now, I will write down the mass balance equation once again, just to highlight the fact that following fact. So, this is my energy balance, this is my mass balance. So, this is the balance, it is not a balance on temperature, it is a balance on energy, but the variable that appears in that balance is temperature, because we define energy as Cp delta T, or change in energy as Cp delta T, and so on. So, we have this temperature, and mass balance has this concentration. Again, it is a mass balance, not a concentration balance, but after certain simplifications we get this kind of behavior. So, now if you look at these two equations, these are highly coupled equations. Why? Because first of all, Rj, or for that matter Ri, which appear in these two places, okay, these are functions of Cj and T. Okay, both are functions of Cj and T. So, how Cj changes depends on temperature, and how temperature changes depends on the concentrations. So, these are not uncoupled equations. So, mass and energy effects have to be considered together and not in isolation of each other. For a stirred tank reactor, these balances simplify to this particular set of equation. That is, what we have now is we have the molar flow rate entry exit of the Jth species, Rj is the reaction rate and Nj is the number of moles here. So, dNj dt is equal to coming in, going out plus Rj. So, we now have a balance over the entire reactor, because this is a stirred tank reactor, there are no variations. And similar energy balance, this is the energy content of the reacting mixture. So, this is energy accumulation, this is convective flow in and out. So, enthalpy of the stream coming in minus enthalpy of the stream coming out. This again is the contribution due to reaction. So, this is convection, this is accumulation, the energy, and this is, if you have a reactor with a jacket, what would be the rate of heat addition. So, in this particular case, AK is the area of jacketed area, U is the transfer coefficient, Tr minus T. Tr is the reference temperature, T is the temperature inside. So, once again, if we are passing hot fluid in the jacket, we will have heating. If we are passing cold fluid, we will have cooling. So, this is how stirred tank reactor mass and energy balance equations look like. These are just reactors where we assume that there is no heterogeneous phases or only single phase. Now, one may ask question, what happens if you have heterogeneous reaction, that is when you have two phases, multi-phase situation. So, this is something that we will see in our next session, that how do we represent a heterogeneous phase while taking into account or while looking at design of heterogeneous reactions. So, before I conclude this session, what we actually did today was to conclude our discussion on gas liquid reactions and thereby a general discussion on heterogeneous reactions. So, we looked at today in particular case where the reaction is so rapid or instantaneous that it is confined to a plane rather than the volume, either in the bulk or in the boundary layer. And then we started discussing about reactor design by focusing on what are the important considerations in reactor design and looking at the mass balance equations for tubular reactor as well as for a stirred tank reactor. So, in the next session we will look at what happens when we have heterogeneous reactions, that is either gas solid catalytic or non catalytic reactions, and how do we account for the presence of these two phases in developing the mass and energy balances. So, that will be the topic for the next session. Thank you.